Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. We got a huge show for you today as we are linking two preseason games together as we get you set for what's going to be just a few days away from final cutdown day, and then we're into first week of regular season action. So there's a lot to catch up on. We're going to review all of our takeaways from Toronto's 30-13 loss to the Montreal Alouettes in preseason. There's a huge signing that we got to talk about, just happened today. Janarian Grant, kick punt return specialist. The signing of John Moka, quarterback out of the Colorado School of Mines, making it two ore diggers on the Toronto Argonauts now. We'll talk about that, and we will get you set for Friday night's matchup in Guelph. Preseason game number 2, the preseason finale against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. All that and more is coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Before we get going, JB, Something in the Water has got two big announcements for you. So number one, next week, we are going to be doing something called the Something in the Water Pick 6. And that is an opportunity for you to win a 6-pack of Something in the Water beer. We're going to be doing that every week. You'll be able to follow along on our social media channels. Give us a question to answer every week. And if we pick your question to answer on the show, you will be able to win a 6-pack from Something in the Water. You go pick it up at their Toronto location in Liberty Village. It's just steps away from BMO Field. So why not pick it up the day of the game, grab your 6-pack, go on down, do some tailgating, and head on in to enjoy some Argos football. And don't forget, mark it in your calendars for the opening day of the CFL season for the Toronto Argonauts, Sunday, June 9th. The game's at 7 o'clock against the BC Lions. We will be down at Something in the Water. Come and join us there. There's going to be food. There's going to be great beer, obviously. And if you're a lucky winner, maybe you can pick up your Pick 6-pack. Check out Something in the Water down in Liberty Village, steps from BMO Field and steps from Lamport Stadium. All right, JB, let's get into that 30-13 preseason loss to Montreal. Sort of a weird setup because it's not typical for teams to send like just the starting offense and not the starting defense, but that's kind of what happened in that Montreal game, where the only starter who didn't travel with the team was Demonte Coxio and Darius Sirocco. Those two guys that are kind of projected starters, they didn't make that trip. But on defense, everybody that was sort of projected, penciled in as a starter on defense, was left at home except for Tavares McFadden and Mason Pierce, who started in the secondary. So what do you make of that, first of all? Because we didn't get a chance to talk about that. We recorded last week prior to depth charts coming out. What did you make of sending that kind of squad on the road?
Well, I think it suggests that they're more concerned about offensive development than they are. I think they feel pretty confident with what they have defensively. I think they feel pretty confident about who's going to play what. And you send maybe a couple of vets to try and keep some structure in that backfield so that things, you're able to have guys out there who can make calls and relay calls. But yeah, I think it suggests that defensively they feel very confident, and offensively they still have a lot of questions about who's going to fill out that wide receiver room. And where are we at quarterback?
And I don't know if the game necessarily went perfectly, like the way that they would plan. You don't plan for
I hope not.
A 30-13 loss, but I think there's some really good opportunities. Some good film studies going to come out of that week for sure. They were put in some really interesting scenarios, and we'll go through some of those. Before we get to that, though, I just got to say I love going to Percival Molson Stadium. I think that is a really fun place to watch a game. It's not a nice stadium. There's nothing nice about the stadium itself, other than the history is amazing. But like, what a view. You're sitting there, and I wasn't in the press box for this game. I actually went with my son. He and I have not watched a football game together since 2019 because I've been working every time we've had the Argos game. And so for this one, Hoagie and I weren't on the air for this one. So we went down, sat in the stands, sat with Deontay Knight's family and the Adebaboye family as well. And had a great time, enjoyed the game. But yeah, I forgot from that side of the stadium, just what a spectacular view. The press box is not the same at Percival Molson Stadium. It is, you gotta walk all the way up there. First of all, it is not the same experience. But yeah, really cool to take in a football game, and it was really cool to see all the Argos fans that actually traveled down for the game, that took the train like we did, and showed up to cheer on the Double Blue. It was kind of a neat thing to open the game. But let's get into the game itself, JB. The first thing that stood out to me was this did not feel like a preseason game, because it was like every play there was an all-out blitz from both sides. What do you read from that?
Well, I think you were going to respond in kind. I think once teams start sending heat, then you're like, okay, let's go, and then you send heat as well. I mean, it's true. It doesn't make a ton of sense in the preseason to you would have hoped maybe you would have more of kind of an agreement that we're not going to send these blitzes, but yeah, I mean they did, and Toronto got very close a lot of times. Montreal definitely was able to score some big plays on almost sacks. I mean the game almost could have gone very differently. I thought I was I wish Toronto had gotten home more, but I felt that Toronto definitely was right there.
Yeah, they were so close. Like the tackling was not good in this game. I thought, especially as the game wore on, like as you got into that, the second unit was sort of starting, but once you got into that third unit, once you got into depth, there were some plays that Montreal running backs made, like Mike Weber Jr., who just seemingly couldn't be tackled on one play. It seemed like everybody touched him. Tackling needs to improve, and coaches were all over guys in film this week on that. But it happened in the backfield too. A couple times they got Caleb Evans back there, and he just ran circles. One of the touchdowns he threw was just it reminded me of the Trey Ford touchdown last year, where it just shouldn't happen, but. What a spectacular play for Caleb Evans. He's had some great and terrible games versus the Argos. It's nothing in the middle. It's always something. There's a show when Caleb Evans plays. So there's a little bit of that, like you're saying, missed opportunities in the backfield, and Montreal did get home and did send pressure a lot, but. Yeah, I guess you want to see some of the younger players react in those situations. You put them in stressful scenarios. You say, look, we're gonna put you in cover zero. Let's see how well you stick to your guy, especially with Montreal starting almost all their projected starters on both sides of the ball. So that was a good test for them to see how they responded. I'm just not used to it in preseason. It's not like they were running really exotic coverages, but they were sending halfback blitzes and every manner of linebacker blitz. So it was unusual, but I wondered if that might just be kind of maybe some memories of the last time these two teams played, and maybe a little bit of venting or something like that, anger that needs to get out. Looking at the quarterback play, maybe that's the best place to start. I don't think we necessarily saw anyone really distance themselves. We went into the game with Cameron Dukes as the favorite to win the starting job, and I don't think that changed anything. I think he probably had the best night of the three guys. He threw a great touchdown pass, threw an interception that I'm sure he'd love to have back. But it was the way that he used his feet, which to me I found really impressive. He was able to buy time, to find targets, and that touchdown pass was the result of him being able to sidestep Marc-Antoine Dequoy, who was untouched on a safety blitz, and he just shook him and then threw a touchdown pass up to Marshall. And so that was a real positive. But I can't help but get frustrated with Dukes when he uses his feet when he doesn't need to. There were a few plays there. One stood in particular in the early going of the game. It was a 3-man rush from Montreal. The pocket was holding up just fine, and he escaped out to his right, and there's just nobody over there. He ended up having to throw the ball away. How do you keep a quarterback in the pocket like that when he sees so much success, when he makes things happen and gets successful plays on the ground, throws a touchdown pass using his feet? But how do you avoid getting him to leave the pocket at every opportunity, even when the pocket holds up?
Yeah, I mean, it is what defines whether young quarterbacks are going to become great quarterbacks or not, right? The two most common flaws you see are quarterbacks not keeping their eyes up, not keeping their eyes downfield as the play breaks down, quarterbacks picking checkdowns too quickly, and quarterback scrambling too quickly, right? Like those are your huge red flags. And essentially it's what makes the difference between a starter and a backup. Um, it is hard not to scramble because you have to process information faster. You have to identify receivers quicker. You have to fire that football out with a motion that is maybe faster than you have. You know, it's hard to kill him. I think that Dukes is what Dukes is. I think Dukes is a fine backup quarterback, but as a fine backup quarterback, I think that you're going to run into quarterback who scrambles too early and a quarterback who's too quick to read the check down. And those are really hard to break. Like they just are. You know, if you could, you would be a starter. And I haven't seen anything yet in Dukes to suggest that he has the potential to be a starter.
You see glimmers of it. Like I think that's a bit harsh because I think I see the potential.
Because I do actually like Dukes in the red zone.
Yeah, well, for sure. It's funny how it's so different there, but that's because that's sort of his box. Like my knock on him is I would like to see him push the ball downfield a little bit more because I feel, and I could feel that even though he only played like half the first quarter, you could feel the Montreal defense tightening up. They're not respecting him deep. He doesn't have a big arm, but he can still stretch out the D. It's still in there. Like it's not like he's incapable of throwing 40 yards down the field. He can. It's not a strength of his game, but I think you have to take some shots. You have to occasionally stretch out the defense a little bit. And I don't think that can be their style. And that's something that I wrote about. If you want to check out my post-game reaction article on 3downnation.com, I wrote about how the Argos aren't going to be able to play consistently the sort of Chad Kelly way that they played last season, where you're always going down the field. That's just not going to be how the Argos win games this year. It's going to be with defense. It's going to be with sustaining drives and making high percentage completions, yards after the catch, a solid running game. Like that's how the Argos are going to have to win with Cameron Dukes at the helm. But I still think every so often you need to push the ball, and we haven't really seen Dukes air it out yet, just to keep that safety wondering, I mean, is this the play? Is this where they're going to try and burn me? Just to keep those corners off. Because on the interception that Dukes threw, this was a cover 3 pass, and you've got the corner out there who is supposed to be respecting deep routes. His receiver, Justin Marshall, ends up running kind of a skinny post. It was a late throw to come out, but the thing is the corner shouldn't be there in the first place. The corner was only there to pick that ball off because he didn't respect that deep. He just didn't think it was going there. He didn't believe that Marshall was going to tear past him and Dukes was going to air it out over top. And so he kind of sat and he was able to undercut Marshall on that. On his route. And I don't know, I'm not in the huddle, I don't know what that was supposed to be. Did Marshall run the right route? Was there something else there? But just to me, it looked like a corner that wasn't respecting anything other than this being a 15-20 yard pass at most. And so that worries me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it worries me a lot of it. I don't want to be the Grim Reaper. But I think what you saw, I know they weren't running, they were running very vanilla offense. But I mean, my concern is you look around the CFL when you don't have a quarterback that you fear, you lose almost everything. You lose the ability to run effectively because the box is full. You lose the field position battle because you're just constantly going to and out and you're just not able to flip the field. So you're constantly starting defensively from your own half. It makes it very physically demanding on the defense to be on the field all the time. I mean, these are not attacks on Dukes. These are just the reality of teams that don't have a great starting quarterback. You saw it last year in Ottawa. You saw it in Hamilton. You saw it in Edmonton. Like there's no, you can't, it's like a race car's engine. Like it's all fine till the race starts, and either you have the engine or you don't. And I'm concerned with what I saw. I hope Dukes plays in the final exhibition game because what I saw was a huge problem, because if defenses are going to bring heat and crouch at 10 yards, that is going to make life a slog for the Argos offense.
It's tough. Like we've had teams certainly that have had really good quarterback play, but not necessarily quarterbacks that have been able to air it out. And once teams figure that out, it does make it really tough because you can't make any mistakes. If you're throwing 5 and 6 yard passes in 3-down football, it makes it so tough. It's like getting a holding penalty in 3-down football. Same thing. It just completely destroys your drive. You can't afford to have that stuff.
You can't throw a 5-yard pass when the defense knows you're going to throw a 5-yard pass. I mean, it just makes it really hard. It means every single pass you throw is contested, right? Every pass is going to be bang, bang because they're crouching on it. They do not fear you throwing the ball 25 yards down the middle like Fajardo did on that touchdown, right? Like that is what backs the defense off. Then you have to play fair. You can't go cover 0. You can't bring the safety down into the, you know what I mean? You have to respect it or he burns you on it. And yeah, I think I would be concerned. It's hard to say because who knows how vanilla the offense was, but I would love to see a quarter of great play from Dukes in the final preseason game because it's going to make life really difficult for the team if they have 2 and outs. I mean, 2 and outs are just deadly in CFL. Like, you just constantly are standing on your own 30-yard line, and you can just get field goaled to death, which is essentially what happened.
And I think one of the reasons we like him so much in the end zone is that that's how defenses play that same style, no matter where Dukes is on the field. And so in the end zone, suddenly he's actually got that skill set to, like in that red zone area. I mean, he's got that skill set to be able to beat that because where teams are going to run 0 and 1 and stuff like that, he can make a guy miss. And suddenly his receiver will spring open. He's really good down there. And so the question, though, is like, how can we get there consistently? If we look at the other quarterback action, Nick Arbuckle came in second. He didn't look as good as he did for us in the double blue game last week. Just the accuracy wasn't there, or maybe it was a sense of timing, like finally not being in camp, like as long as everyone else has caught up to him. There were a few passes where he had receivers open down the sideline. The ball didn't quite get there. He did lead a couple nice drives to close the first half. They settled for field goals, but he was able to string drives together like a good veteran does. He's reading the defense while he's seeing what's there. I just wanted to see more accuracy from him. I just felt like because he came in against the number 2s, and he still had a lot of weapons out there himself, I would like to have seen some of those drives finish. Like the only touchdown of the day came from Cameron Dukes, and I would like to have seen Nick Arbuckle get into the end zone. I would have liked to have seen Brian Scott get into the end zone. And, Brian Scott was hurt a little bit because there were at least 3 drops. He ended up 10 of 20, which isn't good statistically. And again, the Argos are not a team that can complete 50% of their passes. But yeah, to be fair, 3 of those were drops. He had a couple really nice scrambles. It was both a good and bad sign that he led the team in rushing yards. But yeah, right at the end, he ends up scrambling inside the Montreal 20. And as he's like diving forward, the ball gets punched out, turns the ball over, and you could just see the anguish. He was lying on the field afterwards because he knew like that was such an opportunity. He was leading a team of kids down there. He's got all these rookies with him, and he took charge. And that was, one thing I'll say about Brian Scott is to see his leadership on the sideline. I was sitting right behind the Argo bench, and I'm watching all the exchanges from the very first play of the game. He's got a tablet in his hand, and every formation, every play that's run, he's looking at how Montreal lined up, and he's going over to his guys that he knew were going to be out there with him, Shropshire and Matal and all those guys. And he's like, I'm not right there to see exactly what he's saying, but it looked like he's going through alignment. It's like, okay, when we see this, here's how we're going to react. This is the timing. I want to throw the ball right here. I want you to break at this depth. And that kind of leadership is needed when you've got a bunch of rookies, a bunch of kids that he's out there playing with. And it would have been so huge for that group to be able to cash in. It was, would have been a meaningless touchdown in terms of the result of the game. But I think for that unit, it would have been huge. And I was pretty devastated for that whole group because you had such good play. Kevin Matal coming to life. and yeah, Scott leading them down there, but they just couldn't get out of their own way and ended up turning the ball over again.
And,
So
and I feel for him because it is incredibly hard as a 2 or 3 in professional football to get better. You don't get the reps. You don't get the time. I mean, essentially, unless you're going to pay out of your own pocket and rent a field, like you just don't get the reps. You don't get the time with the ones. At best, like if you're 2, sometimes you get to be a scout and you're not running your offense. You're running random plays off a sheet, and it's okay for mechanics, but you're not really learning the offense. It's a tough racket to try and improve when you're grinding. So I hope that that they I guess really that they don't give up, because I do agree with you. I think he has a presence to him, which is what you love to see in a quarterback. But it's a tough road to get those twos. And you look at the Argos, like I don't think it's by accident that they signed a quarterback.
yeah, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, bringing in another guy, more competition. This might have, it probably happens anyway. I don't think that's necessarily because of the result. I think that regardless of what happened on Saturday, they probably signed a quarterback anyway. But still, it's not, you're not turning guys away at this point. You're not saying, no, our room's good, we're full. But do you think we probably see the same order coming up? Like I would imagine, I don't think anyone did enough to really move anywhere. I think my guess is it's going to be Dukes, Arbuckle, Scott again. I don't think anyone did enough to move up or down from that trio.
No, I agree. I think they probably want to see a full quarter out of Dukes and then a full quarter out of Arbuckle and then Scott in the second half. I'd be surprised. I mean, maybe they want to see a little more out of Arbuckle. Maybe he eats into Scott's time a little, but yeah, I'd be surprised if we didn't see a repeat of that. Or maybe they push Dukes. Maybe they want to see Dukes go for a whole half. Maybe they're not all in yet.
And then in terms of the rest of the offense, no one got any more than 3 carries, so it was really hard to gauge the run game. I still like what I see from Kadeem Carey. He's got explosion that I didn't really see from him much last year, and he was bottled up a little bit last year, had injuries. I like what I see from that limited action from Carey.
Yeah, turned a corner on that zone read. Like it was nice. Like even that, even though there's not many reps, like still. A lot of guys can't turn that corner, and he did, and he got that. He took it wide and he turned the corner and got upfield, and I thought he looked, on that play, like he looked great. Like that is not an easy play to run.
No, and we saw him do something similar in the double blue game where he just seems to be able to get to that edge. I think people underestimating his speed. He's got a very misleading stride because it doesn't look like he's moving that fast, and suddenly he's turning the corner. So. I'm encouraged by that. I would like more of a sample size, like 3 carries for 19 yards is great, but we need to see a bit more. But obviously, what Kadeem Carey is, so I don't expect him to get a ton of work this coming week. Deontay McMahon, a little bit up and down. He had a really costly fumble. It was a fumble that changed the game. I think it was off. It was off a check down. McMahon ends up kind of open in the flats. His defender, I believe, suffered a knee injury and dropped to the ground. McMahon has an opportunity to make a huge play, but the ball gets punched out. And he made up for it after that, because I think the next time the offense came out on the field, McMahon touched the ball like each of the next 3 plays and made something of every single one of them. I thought he ran really well. It's the first time that I've seen him in live action with that level of danger, and that was what we were so excited about when the Argos first signed Deontay McMahon, was how explosive he could be, that big playability. And so I was pretty encouraged by him. Receiving game, I could do without DeVaris Daniels getting hit in the knees on the first play of the game. I just about spat out my Coke because, I think it was the very first play of the game, takes a quick pass and immediately just gets hammered by a cornerback, like right in the knees. And then he gets hit in the head a few plays later. I was like, let's get DeVaris out here. We know what Tavares Daniels is. I know we got to see the quarterbacks work with the starters and stuff, but let's just sit Tavares on the bench until the start of the season. I think we're good with him. So I'm actually hoping we don't see him in Guelph this week, because I could do without that heart attack. Anything else catch you from the other receivers? Nothing. It didn't stand out to me. I feel like the team's kind of missing a deep threat. I thought
Justin Marshall looked nice.
Oh, yeah. You know what? Justin Marshall did, actually. And he was in for DeMonte Coxey. He's got nice measurables. He had the touchdown catch from Dukes.
Yep.
He was a little bit of a surprise for me, because he wasn't someone that I was thinking about coming into camp, but he's done everything right. And the fact that he's getting the nod from the coaching staff at this point, you're sending out, Daniels, Brissett, Ungerer, and Bailey. And the guy you put with him is Marshall, because Coxey's taking or getting the week off. I think that speaks very highly. You want to see how this guy works with the ones. And yeah, he did nothing to disappoint. He made some nice plays. I do want to know if there was anything he did wrong on that Duke's interception, because it's possible. The way that play developed, something looked off with it. And I don't know enough to know what it was, because I don't know what the play was, but there was something strange about that. So was that on Marshall, on Duke's? But I thought he handled himself very well. So I was pleased with that. But it was really tough to gauge a lot of the rest of the receivers. And that's what happens sometimes when you have a whole group of seconds and thirds in there all together. It is tough to evaluate some of these guys. And there could be great players, and we see this all the time, great players that one team cuts and end up being stars somewhere else. There could be those guys in there, and we just never got a chance to see it. So hopefully the Argos aren't missing out on anyone big, especially from that receiving group, because they did cycle a number of guys through there. Defensively, so this was an interesting opportunity for guys with only McFadden and Pierce among the kind of starters we've penciled in getting the nod. It was interesting to see Tyshawn Blackburn get almost the entire game at safety. I thought he made some mistakes, but he made some plays. I'm actually becoming a believer in him. I'm not talking about for this season. I think this is Royce Metier. This is his, this is his team. This is his defense at safety. But Blackburn showed me some things. He got beat. He got beat a couple times. He came down way too early on that Cody Fajardo touchdown pass. But those are things like timing, disguising blitzes, stuff like that, disguising coverages. That's going to come with time. Like the fact that you can't do that game one of preseason isn't really a concern for me. And I'm sure it's not for you either.
No, I think that, there was, I'm not terribly worried about Bus in preseason. Really what I want to see is tackling, and I want to see how, in the secondary, just a instinctual, guys that find the ball. And when you find guys that find the ball, it's just, it's a skill that that you can't really teach. You just have guys who find the ball. And nobody really jumped out defensively. I thought it looked okay. I was hoping maybe there might be a little more flash from somebody in the secondary. I'm still pulling for my guy Benji Franklin, the founding father, but we'll see.
Yeah, he actually made a nice. He came up and made a very nice tackle in space. It was like one-on-one, and he just stopped the receiver dead in his tracks. Those guys did have a few nice plays. McFadden played a great game too. Led the team in tackles again.
He so clearly, right? So clearly was out there, and clearly was the best player on the defense.
Yeah, and just he just looked the most comfortable, and he should. He should look the most comfortable. He is the sort of the elder statesman in that group. I was a little bit concerned about how Montreal seemed to be able to separate he and Pierce fairly well when they're playing, whether they're playing 2 or 3 and they've got those guys spaced out. It did seem like, because McFadden, he's so good at blowing up those quick screens, they were able to really pin him to the line of scrimmage a few times and then open stuff up in behind him, and Pierce is long gone. And the fact that they can stretch those guys out a little bit, there's some vulnerability there to their side. With that sort of 10, 15 yard depth routes. So that that just kind of caught my eye a little bit. Nothing that you can't fix, but I did wonder a bit about that because McFadden is so good close to the line of scrimmage. There were a few times where he had to, get out of dodge to make sure there wasn't a big play happening in behind him because Pierce is like 30 yards away. So that's worth watching. But I thought, those guys are perfectly fine. But like you, I do kind of wish someone jumped out a little bit more. We saw some decent play from Steele. I thought he had really nice coverage down the sideline on one particular route, just really used his body well. And he's not a big guy, but he was able to really press the receiver into the boundary, was able to be physical with him, keep track of where he was without drawing a flag. There we saw a little bit of speed from Parrish coming around the outside. There were little flashes here and there, but there was no one that like took over the game where you're like, whoa, this guy needs to be with the starters now. It didn't really happen for me this week. In terms of special teams, and maybe this ties into one of the moves that happened this week, not bad special teams play. You had Bird back there, Jordan Bird back there for kick and punt returns. Zay Malone had a punt return as well, and it just. Deontay McMahon, I think, also went back for a kickoff return, but nothing really threatened. I like the way that Bird runs with the ball. He runs in a 80s video game sort of slash change of direction is quick. I actually quite like that from him, but there was nothing that really terrifies opposing teams and makes you scheme for, and that might tie into one of the moves that happened today. JB, what are we missing in terms of recapping that game in Montreal? I feel like we've gone pretty thoroughly through what we saw.
Yeah, I don't think it's as bad as it looked.
No, it's not.
If you look at the score, I think that Toronto had 3 turnovers, and they cannot have any turnovers. They're going to have to play a cleaner football game to go 500 without a starting quarterback, without a star. So, I mean, I think that's the big takeaway. I thought they held their own with Montreal. It wasn't like Montreal ran roughshod over them. But you can't have 3 turnovers, and the defense. And these are not the starters, but there is going to be reliance on the defense to turn that ball over. And I think that's the difference. If you take away those 3 turnovers, this is a bit of a rock fight, and get your rocks, because there are a lot of rock fights coming.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be until Chad Kelly returns. It's going to be rock fights, because that's just how it is. That's football when you don't have a star at quarterback. That's what you get is rock fights. But I think the team's strong, though. That's the thing. I think they're well equipped for that. They've got strength at every position, and so you can turn to the run game, you can turn to the defense. You've got veteran receivers who can make plays and make smart reads. It's just going to be down to quarterbacks not making mistakes. It's okay if they don't win the game on their own. The Argos don't need them to do that, but they need them not to give the game away. And that goes for every skill position. You can't, like Deontay McMahon, can't fumble that ball. Same kind of thing.
And similar to Hamilton last year in the first preseason, Montreal's at home. They're going to play the starters for the fans. Toronto is not playing their starting defense. So right off the bat, you have a mismatch. So that's fine. I think the takeaway is that it was fine and some things to work on, but much more to be learned this week.
The one last thing was the Cody Fajardo touchdown pass to Keon Julian Grant. It was funny to see because he's going up against all these rookies, all these first year players, and he's a very experienced Grey Cup winning quarterback. But yeah, he got out there, it was like 3rd and 3. And you can see right away, like right when they broke the huddle, like Toronto's clearly got nobody deep. They're playing zero, and so right away he's looking around. He's like, oh, okay, well, hang on a second, I got an idea. And he starts bringing in Max Protect, and everybody is sort of seeing this develop and knows, oh, he's not looking for a 3-yard completion and a first down. He's looking for everything. And it's one of those things that guys will learn from, and Blackburn will learn from that. He'll learn how to disguise that a little better, how to wait to the last minute, and guys around him will learn. Like Jonathan Edouard too was sort of caught on that, because I think he's looking, he was up looking for a 5-yard hook for something that he can break up. Meanwhile, his guy has a waggle full speed and goes deep on a post with no one in the middle. Those are areas that you got to just sort of anticipate, know the situation, know the quarterback, and think, maybe maybe sees what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I think a couple of guys too learn, this is a league for men. Like, this is not, you have to tackle. You have to take people to the ground. Like, you will get pushed around and you will get dunked on if you don't bring it. And a couple of times, Montreal was just grown men pushing their way into the end zone and, running downhill. And, for a lot of guys, I think that can be a real awakening too. Like, this is not arena football. You need to, like, this is a tough physical game, and you need to be ready to bring that level of violence, because you're going to get smacked otherwise, on the field.
I saw that a little bit with Tyson Hergott, who never, he always looked like the biggest guy in on the play in U Sports, and here he is, a recent draft pick, and he's out there with the Argos. He just got absolutely annihilated on a couple of special teams plays, and and again, he's going to be fine. I'm not worried about Hergott, but he's just not used to it. Like, he's used to being the biggest guy in the room, and like you said, suddenly there are these just freaks of nature out there on the field.
Yeah.
And it's different. So good learning experience for those guys for sure. Let's talk about some of these signings, JB. So Janarian Grant signs with the Toronto Argonauts, an elite return specialist, especially in the punt return department. A guy that has had 7 punt return touchdowns in 41 CFL games, which is pretty absurd. It's like every 5 games you're taking one to the house. And we saw the streak that Javon Leake went on last year. It's hard to sustain that level of play, and Janarian Grant's done that. He had some injuries last season, still put up great numbers. And Argos fans remember him, if from nothing else, if not from like the 2 Grey Cups he did win with Winnipeg. It's the Grey Cup he lost, but he still had a punt return touchdown against the Argos in that Grey Cup game. 5'10", 173, an absolute speedster, but 30 years old as well, and was still available. So it's not necessarily that you can't look at this as wondering, well, why didn't Winnipeg bring him back? Why didn't no one else bring him in? But from everything I can see, this is a great signing for the Argos, who didn't necessarily have that terrifying returner back there. They do now in Janarian Grant. Yeah,
I love it. I mean, absolutely. Field position game, you're going to need you're going to need those extra 5-6 yards. If he averages 23, 24, as opposed to 18, like, those 7 yards are a big deal. You're going to need scoring from your special teams. I think he filled a gap. This is not a team that could skate by with kick return by committee. Like, if you have a great team, sometimes, hey, catch the ball, run the ball, let's play ball. Like, you don't need to do much here, just don't fumble. They're going to need a little more from their special teams. So I love the signing. I mean, 30 years old is still, okay. I mean, I think there's no reason to believe you're not going to get a great season at a 30. He's not a running back.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, it's not like he's got the wear and tear of like an every down running back who's just been hammered again and again. And he had, let's not forget, like I maintain, and people have kind of laughed at me when I've said this, but others have said this as well. I maintain that his kick return last year against Saskatchewan was like 92-yard kick return. I maintain that was one of the best plays in CFL history. It was an amazing return where I have to go back and watch it. It felt like all 12 Rough Riders had a chance to tackle him, because it wasn't the blocking. It wasn't one of those returns where he had amazing blocking, just cut through the gap and off he went. He shook or threw away everybody on that and was just absolutely gassed by the time he got into the end zone. It was an amazing play, and one of the best plays I've ever seen in CFL football, and that's saying something. So to get a guy like that is a guy you're worried about. The other team, special teams coordinator, was talking about that all week. Hey, we're kicking to Janarian Grant this week. Let's make sure we're on point. And that takes away practice time from other things, and that allows you to, as a coach, it's really irritating. Even if you're an OC or a DC, when there's somebody remarkable, when another team's got a remarkable special teams unit, we saw it last year with the Argos with Javon Leake. It does weaken the other positional groups because the focus isn't entirely on O and D. It just gives you something else to think about, something else to spend practice time on. So I love this, and hopefully for the Argonauts, he's got another season or 2 left in him. Corresponding moves that came off that, they released Zay Malone, a speedster who had been doing some returning for the Argonauts, as well as Kerry Vincent, who was a promising young halfback. I think Vincent's out of LSU, We talked about him on this show a few times. Mike Hogan was really high on him when we had him on here a couple of weeks back. Those guys let go. But that, again, when you're releasing guys like Zay Malone and Kerry Vincent, does speak to where the level's at. These aren't final cutdowns, and those are very capable players that are letting go. And so for Argos fans that are really concerned and are just looking at the score 30-13, this is going to be a rough year. I'm telling you, this is a good team. There's a lot of good players still fighting for positions out there, and the release of Zay Malone and Kerry Vincent Jr. only goes to reinforce that. And then the other move was Edward Paradis was added to the retired list. Only 26 years old, a fifth-round draft pick from last season. Lineman out of Houston Christian, played this past year with Montreal Carabin, and he's been added to the retired list. And, never really got a chance to show himself as a Toronto Argonaut other than these 2 preseasons, these 2 training camps. But sad to see a draft pick like that retire nevertheless. JB, let's get into the signing of John Moka. So the Colorado School of Mines, this, I believe, is the first time in the history of pro football that 2 Colorado Schools of Mines players have played together. The other, of course, being Mason Pierce. John Moka is a really fascinating player. He protects the ball really well, throws a lot of touchdowns, doesn't throw a lot of picks, uses his feet well. He's undersized, 5'11", under 200 pounds. I don't think he's going to have enough time to work himself even into the dress list by the start of the regular season. But this is not a guy that I would just sort of dismiss as, late signing, they need someone else in the practice squad. He was the D2 player of the year, and then followed that up by being the D2 player of the year runner-up. And he's got ties to the team in Mason Pierce. So I would keep my eye on John Moka going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of joked about the quarterback signing. He clearly is not being brought in to be the quarterback. But take a look. He kind of does what everybody else does, which makes sense. I think, I'm a big believer in your quarterback being similar, right? Like I don't see any point in having a quarterback that can't fit the system that you've built for your starter. So I think he does fit that. I think, they'll take a look at what his arm is. He's not particularly fast or particularly, his measurables don't jump out at you. But I'm sure he got a positive review from his teammate, and let's see. I don't think it can hurt because 9 games is a long time.
And looking at there's so much Cameron Dukes in his game. He's built a little differently, and it's not like you're saying, like it doesn't necessarily. It's not one thing that jumps out at you, but the numbers are good though. So. His record, 50-7. He's playing for a good team. 15,000 passing yards sounds pretty good. 162 touchdowns, 28 interceptions. That is the best number. 162 touchdowns, 28 interceptions. And then he had almost 2,000 yards rushing with 28 rushing touchdowns. So even though he doesn't have that speed, again, he's not slow. He's fast, but he's not. He's not a 4-3 guy or anything like that. He's not Trey Ford running the ball.
He's mining fast.
He's mining school fast, and but he's smart. Like these mining school guys, these engineers. I love intelligent football players. The Ivy League guys like Flo Remalade, for example. You can't get enough of those guys. And guys from an engineering school, Colorado School of Mines. You're going to get somebody that is very coachable and that is an intelligent football player. And so I'm all for it. I love using this sort of cerebral side of football because that really does make a difference. You can have a bunch of fast guys, a bunch of strong guys, and that's great. It does help. You can win football games like that too. But this is the kind of team they're building right now, at least for now, that is going to have to win with guile and with smarts and with savvy. And so if you've got another guy that has a little bit of that Cameron Dukes flair, let's take a look. Let's see what he is, and maybe in a couple of weeks they have a better sense of what he can bring to the party. Most recently, he was with the Denver Broncos. He was there for their rookie minicamp, and so I'm sure they've had a ton of film to be able to watch on Moka to see what he can bring. But that to me is not for right now, but I think an exciting signing. All right, JB, let's get the people set for the preseason finale. So Friday night in Guelph, You and I will both be there. I suggest you make it down too. If you can get out to the game, it is an amazing experience. Watching at Alumni Stadium in Guelph, watching a pro football game at that stadium, it's great watching U Sports there. Watching a pro game in that venue is really, really cool. So if you can get down there, it's a 7 o'clock kickoff. Friday night. What do you expect to see, JB? We saw the whole starting offense basically, and like nobody from the defense. I got to assume it's going to be most, if not all, of the starting defense, at least for a little while. How do you set up this depth chart this week?
Yeah, I think you probably keep a couple veterans out because you don't need to see them. You don't need to risk them getting hurt. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if McManus didn't play at all. And a couple of linemen, right? Like Oakman, I think you could be perfectly fine with Oak not playing to try and give a look at a couple of positions. But I would imagine secondary-wise, probably going to see the starters in for a quarter. You're bringing people out. It is your home exhibition game. I think the onus is on the team to play as many starters as you can for at least a quarter, if not a half. So yeah, I'm expecting to see pretty close to what you're looking for on opening day on both sides of the ball, give or take. A couple, like you say, maybe Tavares could take the game off.
Yeah,
I think he's paid his preseason dues, but I would imagine 80% of the starters playing for a half. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I would sit, like, offensively, I would sit Tavares Daniels. I don't know if I'd sit anyone else, but I don't necessarily need everybody to play a lot. Get a couple carries for Kadeem Carey. That's it. We know what he is. The rest of the starters, You can start trickling out fairly quickly. But I wouldn't mind. The thing is, like, I would love to see, and I those offensive linemen, like the 5 starters on the O-line, you got to protect them. But can you really get a look at either Arbuckle or Scott if you don't have that starting 5 group out there? I'm not sure you can. Why is there such a drop off? And I don't think I'm asking you this question. It's a little bit rhetorical, but I do want you to answer first, and I'll give you my thought on this. Why is there such a drop off on every team, on every level of football, between the starting O-line and second string O-line that you just don't see on the defensive side of the ball? It doesn't correspond the same way.
Look, much like quarterback, offensive line is incredibly hard. You have to be like as nimble as a martial artist or a ballet dancer, and you have to be as strong as, the mountain from Game of Thrones, and you have to be as smart as a surgeon, and you have to have the reflex time of a jet fighter pilot. And turns out that they didn't make that many of those people. And if you can find like 5 of them, you are way ahead of the game, but you definitely can't wonder why you don't have 6. I think those positions are just incredibly demanding, and that you can, I'll speak defensively, like defensive players are incredible athletes and requires incredible intellect and speed and reaction, but not combined in the same way that offensive line and quarterback does. It's just a different it's a different combination of traits that you have to try and pull together, and it's just harder to find offensive linemen than it is defensive linemen, and just the same way it's harder to find quarterbacks than it is kickers.
And add to that, like in the CFL, and 3 of those guys have to be Canadian also. And so it just limits your population too. And so, those guys are really hard to find. And like I said, I think that it shows up. And even against, 2s against 2s, it's not an even fight anymore. And so it is tough. And we'll see what they do with that, because you can't risk an injury to Isaiah Cage and Peter Nicastro. Like, those guys are so important. So how long do you leave them out there? Will be interesting to see, but I do expect Dukes to play well into the game. I think it might be similar structure. I wouldn't be surprised to see Dukes get a whole first quarter. Arbuckle maybe gets the whole second. Maybe Scott gets the whole second half. Something like that wouldn't surprise me, but I wish there were a way to better evaluate Arbuckle and Scott, knowing that they probably won't get much, if any time at all, with that first group of offensive linemen. But that's kind of what I expect. And then defensively, I do expect most of the starters to play well into the first half, like near maybe a whole half. And like you said, I'm fine with resting McManus. I think almost everyone else, though, and I'm fine with resting McFadden and Pierce. We saw them last week. Everyone else, I think you kind of want to see what they've got, and you'll see how they handle themselves against the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who probably won't put out their full starting group, I wouldn't think, this week. So they should be able to make quick work of the Hamilton Tiger Cats from that standpoint, because just like the game in Montreal, it's going to be a lot of Hamilton's 2s against a lot of Toronto's 1s. But I think that's big for the Argonauts too. They want to give their fans a win in this preseason game. It's been a tough offseason for the Argonauts faithful, and I think coming out of Guelph with a win where you feel good about the direction the club is heading in, you're able to score some points, the defense looks dominant, maybe there's an electric return in there somewhere as well. I think that is exactly what the Argos would love to give their fans.
Yeah, in other years, when you have a veteran quarterback or you feel that you're quite a good team, I couldn't care less about what the preseason record is or what the scores are, anything. Right. They're essentially practices. But I think that's different this year. I think the team wants to feel like they are heading in the right direction. I agree. I think they will play players longer for the purpose of getting that win as a group heading into the season opener.
7 o'clock, Alumni Stadium, the University of Guelph campus, the Hamilton Tiger Cats against the Toronto Argonauts. That will just about do it for us on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.